up YouTube, welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to teach you guys how to draw noses. Now there's 5 things that you want to identify before you go into drawing the nose. Now the first thing is going to be your reference. This is the most important thing for you. I'm going to teach you guys how to do that. Then the third one is saturation. Fourth is identifying shadows. This is super important. When you're drawing the nose, a lot of people do not know how to correctly identify shadows and identify their colors. And finally, how to blend the nose. And I'm going to teach you guys how to do this realistically, semi-realistically, and also how, especially for beginner artists who are looking to find a nice start. Now there's bad and there's good references. The second thing you want to identify is shapes. I have been over so many different ways on how to draw the nose, and I have found the best way to identify the structure of the nose, to remove details from the nose so that it still looks like the nose. So first we're going to go on Pinterest, my favorite website ever, and I'm going to explain to you what references you want to avoid and which references you actually want to look for as a beginner artist. Well, this is what we're going to want to do. So you can either look up noses, you can look up faces, it really doesn't matter, but what you're looking for is a nose with shadow, okay? This nose, as you can see, I would say it's still a good reference only because you can actually see color in the nose. You can see that she has a lot of pink on her nose. You can still see a little bit of shadows. It's not super shadowy, and there's not a clear place to where the direct light is hitting. So let me give you an example of a clear direct lighting. You can tell that there's a direct lighting because the light is coming from here. So first of all, you see this highlight in the nose. It's right here on this side. And then there's a shadow, a cast shadow. So if you're trying to find a good reference as a beginner artist, I'm gonna always recommend to find a reference that has a cast shadow because it kind of teaches you where light should hit. And even if it's a reference that doesn't really have much shadow in it, you can still kind of learn from it, from the good references, if that makes sense. So this would be a good reference. This would be a poor reference, okay? She has light, and you can still kind of see it, but there are worse examples. But you can see that she has light coming from all directions of her face. So it's kind of harder to identify where the shadow is. There's a shadow, a small, very small shadow here, but there are better examples. But I would not recommend this to a beginner artist because you're going to struggle to find where it starts to get darker and where it starts to get lighter. It's also she has very smooth skin, or maybe she has some sort of filter on, but you also can't really see much color in the face too. You really have to really look at it in order to tell where you should add colors, and that's not something that a beginner artist should be looking for necessarily right now. However, if you're adamant about picking a certain reference and the shading isn't very perfect, then this is what I'm going to recommend. You're going to actually download the image, and go to your camera roll, and you're going to edit. And then they have filters that can make it black and white. And just by doing that alone, it is so much easier to identify where the shade is. This is what it was before, and this is what it's like after. It's also a lot easier if you're doing paper or if you're doing graphite drawings, because simply you just go based off of the tones that you see. You don't have to really struggle for the tones. But as of right now, as a beginner artist, I'm going to recommend what I previously said, which is to simply find a reference that has good shading where you can correctly identify, the lights and the darks. And I'm actually going to do that for myself so that you guys can be on the same page as me, and I'm not doing something that's not on the same level of whatever you're going to choose. I've actually drawn her before, which is kind of funny. I don't have her saved, but I've drawn her before, but we're just going to go with her again because it's just the easiest. I hate scrolling on Instagram. I hate scrolling on Pinterest because once you start scrolling, it's like you can never stop. So yeah, we're gonna stick with this, okay? First, what I want to do actually is I want to go over my process before I do anything. Just a quick summary of everything, my thought process when I'm drawing. And so this is what I want you guys to think about and visualize when you're doing the same. So here's the video. I start by identifying the shapes, and this is the shape that I am recommending to you guys, and let me explain why. I'm recommending this shape because it helps you with almost everything that you need to know. First of all, the shading. When you do this, you get to kind of identify, okay, well, which part of the nose is shaded and which part is illuminated, or does that apply to your reference? here in this triangle part, this is where most of your shading is going to be. Sometimes even depending on the lighting, just because your nose is protruding outwards, you're still going to have shading underneath the nose. You can identify where the nostrils are, and then also where these lines intercept is where the tip of the nose is, which can also help you with the highlighting. It's super, super simple. You can add on to it if you're struggling to figure out the size, because everybody's nostrils are different. If you're struggling with that, you can also add circles here. It's just a really good layout for the nose, and it helps not create a flat nose, which is something that I used to struggle with, and I still kind of struggle with to this day. This formatting, I promise you guys, will help you so much. So that's why I recommend this. So as you can see, when I'm in the sketching process, I'm still actually thinking about where the light and where the dark hits. And then I put a little gradient here because it's not going to be a defined, when you're drawing realistically, there's no defined straight line of where the highlighting and where the darkness intercept. There's going to be some sort of gradient because your nose is not two triangles like this. It's more smoother. At this point, this is when I start actually identifying the colors. I would refrain, probably not to this many colors, but probably like 5 colors that represent a general idea of all of the colors that you can see in the nose. So obviously there's going to be more than this, but the reason why I recommend only restricting yourself to this many colors is because a lot of times beginner artists will get a little bit overwhelmed with the amount of colors that they see, or just mentally they just start to kind of shut down. For example, myself. So in order to kind of fix this, especially in the beginning process when you're only supposed to be blocking out shapes, you want to make sure that you're only using these colors. Make sure these colors are saturated. Make sure you're not, if you're a digital artist, make sure you're not directly getting colors from the reference, and you know exactly what I mean. You're not really teaching yourself anything. You want to try to get to a point where you're only being visual. Visually, I see this color, so I go in and I try to get as close as possible, not just copying it directly from the reference, okay? So you want to make sure you're doing that. Make sure these colors aren't super dull. This color is a little bit dull because it's the shading. That's okay. You can see she has a little bit of grays, so that's why I ended up choosing that color. This color, however, is saturated. You can see a lot of red tones in, you can see a lot of red tones in this color, as well as the orange one. It's very saturated, as well as the yellow one. So make sure you're just picking pretty saturated colors, because the last thing you want is for it to be dual. And pro tip, brushes do matter, okay? So when you're first starting out, this is traditional artist and digital artist, make sure that the size of your brush is relatively large, because if you are immediately using a small brush, first of all, you're taking way too long, because that's gonna take you forever. Second of all, you're gonna get too focused on the details way too quickly, and that's the last thing that you want to do. Another thing is, if you're kind of confused on that, just think of small brush for detailing, large brush for blocking. And detailing doesn't come until the end of the process. Once you start wanting to add every pore, if you want to be really realistic and you want to add every hair on the person's face, first of all, make sure it's not my face, because I don't want y'all all up in my grill like that. And second of all, make sure that you're doing that at the end, okay? So you're not stressing yourself out. So yes, you're gonna block out these colors, and you can see that I'm starting to add the highlights, and then I'm starting to blend. Now, pause again. For the blending process, this is also really important. When you're blending, you want to make sure that you're not going blend crazy, okay? The first round of blend, you can kind of go a little bit more than usual, but once you're starting to add more details, it doesn't make sense for you to go blend crazy again, because then you're just going to lose all your details. So what I recommend is to only blend where the two colors intersect. So imagine this hand is black and this hand is white. You're only going to blend these fingers together, these two fingers. You're only going to blend it. You're not going to blend all over here, because then it's just going to get all muddy. So blend exactly where the two colors intersect, and try to get as smooth as a gradient as possible without being, again, like I said in my last video, without making it look airbrushed in a bad way. Okay, so now I continue. I'm adding, more saturation. I'm adding wherever I see colors, I'm adding it. This is another part, which is how to shade. Again, I went over this. I do the same thing. I identify the shapes. This is a different way. I did not use the same structure, but it has the same premise where it's the diamond, and you can go on and add more circles if you want to have more. Her nose is a little bit more structured. A lot of African Americans and Asians, they are kind of known, me as well, are known for not really having a bridged nose. And it's kind of flat, so oftentimes you won't see as much shading there. She has a more defined bridge, so I went ahead and added that so that I can see, okay, right here there's a defined shadow, right here there's a defined shadow. But again, you can kind of alter the shapes based off of the reference you're using, based on the person you're using, but ideally, and always, 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 you should be using a reference and you should be identifying shapes within the reference. So yes, I start adding these colors. Again, I'm restricting myself to only these 4 colors. Once I start getting a little bit, better and more confident, I'm adding in more colors that I see from the reference, but I'm not using, the drop tool so that I can know exactly what color it is directly from the reference. I'm using my imagination. Then I'm adding freckles because she has freckles, and I'm blending, and I'm making sure that everything looks as good as possible. This is the last one. So yes, that is my process. So now we're gonna go ahead and we are going to start, and I'm going to give you all the tips, okay? You better not go back and run your mouth and tell anybody else about these tricks. You better just give them the link to this video because I'm about to blow your minds. I'm gonna go ahead and add the photo. So if you're working traditionally, all you're gonna do is just make sure that you have a printout. I wouldn't recommend using your phone, but it's possible. I guess you can do it, but I wouldn't recommend it. However, you can print out your reference and you can use that on the side so that you can work as we do traditionally, which is just to put the, which is to insert a photo, which would be this one, and then have it right here. What I would recommend doing is actually drawing on top of your reference. You can remove this, so I'm just gonna put it on a different layer so that when I'm ready, I can remove it just in case it's in my way. I'm gonna use a pretty vibrant color. I'm gonna use purple. And I'm gonna start identifying those shapes, as I said earlier. I mean, it's not perfect, but it shows you generally. Once you get to a certain point when you become better at identifying the face, you won't even have to draw this. This is mainly just for you guys to visualize it, but I don't do this every time I draw a nose. I simply see it visually in my mind. And again, I did not say this, but this is how those artists that you see on Instagram who draw those people in the train stations, that's how they do it. They just get to a point where they can visualize everything. So I really like this color background, so I'm just gonna go ahead and, I know I said not to do that, but this is only for the background. Oh my gosh. Let's get a better brush. Okay, so I'm just gonna go ahead and just lay out this color because I kind of like it. Now that I have my little part where I'm gonna draw the nose, this is when you can start adding your shapes. Guys, I'm fiddling around with this, but honestly, I just started using digital art. Like, I am a traditional artist at heart, okay? So don't judge me. And then it goes like that. And her nostrils aren't very visible because her head is kind of tilted downwards. And this took me not very long, but it might take you longer, which is totally okay. Once you're confident with your sketch, which I am, that is when you can remove this part. Now at this point, this is when I start identifying the colors that I'm going to use, and I'm going to restrict myself to 5 so that I'm not a hypocrite. So she has pretty yellow tones. So what I do is I go over to the yellow part with a little bit of orange, and then I just kind of guide myself to a pretty decent color that is close to her skin. So I would say that this is pretty accurate right here. So that's what I'm going to use. 1 second. So go ahead and put that on the side. That's going to be the more illuminated part of her face. This is the color that I see. It's probably not that accurate, but I am practicing my ability to identify color. So now for the shaded part, I kind of see purple and like a fuchsia. So we're gonna go over to the pink side, and then we're just gonna go like down here. This is what I identified as the shaded part. Doesn't have to be accurate. Now there's like some like mid-tone right here underneath her nose, and I see a lot of orange. So I'm gonna go more on the orange side. And I'm going to go here, pretty good orange color. So now we have 3. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna look more at the bottom of the nose. I'm just gonna go back to a deeper variation of color, a darker color of this. And that's gonna be her nostrils. And now I can't help but see this little like greenish part of her. I don't know if it's the camera quality. It's not very good quality, but there's a little bit of greens. And that's cool. So I'm gonna go, actually I kind of have a greenish color here already. I'm gonna go here, and that's gonna be, it's like an olive green. So now I'm only gonna use these colors. If you're doing traditional, you can do the same thing. This is just your color palette. So now what I'm gonna start doing is, I personally like the wide brush, the flat brush, I mean, this one right here. But you don't have to use it. I use this one because it's kind of like paint-like. It's like, I don't know, I just kind of like it. But I'm gonna use this it's a bigger brush, so it's gonna be a little bit, I'm gonna make it a little bit smaller, but you just wanna make sure that the brush is making pretty big strokes like that, and not something that's more like this, if you can even see that. You don't want a sketching, you want a flat, thick brush. So I'm just gonna start and grab from each. What I like to do is I work from light to dark. Everybody's different, but that's what I like to do.
What's up? So it's future Kimari, and you can see that in this process it looks very ugly, and that's totally okay. This is not the time to be panicking about how it looks. Right now you should just be focusing on the dark and the light areas and making sure you just have a good base so that you have a great finished result that is nice and vibrant and beautiful. Now I am blending here, but I'm making sure that I'm blending like crazy. This is the only time where you can correctly do that because you're just trying to, again, get a good base and you're not focusing on details right now. So just remember that when you're in the beginning stages. Okay, I gotta go now. Past Kimari's coming back.
If you're having problems identifying color, you can see that the value of these colors are the same. So like, this right here is that color, and this right here is this color. I mean, they're basically, this is slightly darker, but they're basically the same. So you know not to put black right here and then like brown right here because that wouldn't match the reference. Too often I see people coming to their own conclusions, not really identifying, the different shadows that are within the face. So we know that it's safe to say that we can put this same color brown where that part of the face is, which would be right here. So there's like a little dip that we can put right here. And those two values match.
Now at this point, I am blending, but I'm being a little bit more precise. I'm adding a very opaque layer of whatever color I see in certain areas. So if I feel like a tone needs to be a little bit more orange, I'll do that and then I'll blend it out. This is usually this, oh my gosh, I can't speak. You know what, this is what I get for trying to edit late at night. Don't worry, if you like the video, I'll airdrop you my knowledge. I'ma just go, bruh.
I noticed that it was a little bit lighter right here, so I'm just adding that bit of lightness. And it really did add a lot more dimension. Also, the nose kind of goes down and spills here, so you can add the nose going down here. But you can notice that it's like that here. You can see the nose going down here, but you can't really see it on the other side. And those small details like that really do make a difference. You're having a problem with lines and you don't want your lines to look too harsh because the last thing you want is for very harsh lines for realistic noses, especially depending on the lighting and the reference, is instead of adding, so let's say for example, you have this color. Instead of simply noticing, oh, there's a curve right here, let me add a curve. Instead of doing that, you're gonna have your color, you're gonna have your curve, right? And then you're gonna blend right here. So then your curve is still there. Like for example, for the side here of the nose right here, it's still there, but it's not as harsh as this. You're blending right here. And if it's vice versa, for example, this part is illuminated, but this part is in darkness, what you're gonna do is you're gonna have your darkness more illuminated, right? Then you're gonna add your darkness. You're gonna blend, which also loses its form, right? But then you can go in with that color and you can add, you can add right here. That way it's not as harsh of a line. You can blend out all of your edges slightly to give the illusion that it's harsh, but it's not too harsh. Because you'll notice when it's too harsh like that, that it doesn't look like the reference and you start getting frustrated. I don't know if that made sense, but it's both of these look much better than the top right here.
Okay guys, I'm actually gonna lock in when I'm doing the voiceover now. So I did a gouache because I noticed that my tones were kind of off, and that's just to add a very thin layer of paint on top of your reference so that it changes the tones, which I did here. Farewell.
So bam, the color kind of spills over here as well. You can add that. So when you're drawing the nose, most noses will have red. So like this would be, for example, the pit. This would be, sorry, the opacity. This would be the pit of the nostril, right? But most lights will have a transition color, and for the nostrils particular, there will be like this red hue underneath the nostril, and it really helps. Oops. With the blending part. Oh my gosh. It really helps with the blending part because you'll see that, and I did that just now, but it's a much smoother transition to the skin here. For example, if that was the skin color, it's a much better transition between that, and then that would be like the bottom part of the nose. If you guys can visualize that, it would be, this would be the shading. Just looking at your own nose, you can see that. Of course, lighting also plays a big role, but in this case, and as many others, there's that kind of brownish, reddish tone there. Same goes for the lips.
So I actually lied. This is when I start doing the finishing touches. I would say that my art process is like 20% sketch and I don't know math. The rest is just actually detailing. Just kidding, 80%. But nah, seriously, I really do just start blocking out colors because I noticed that the reference was a lot darker. That's why I always recommend going light to dark because it's just easier to retract back, especially if you're working traditionally. This video is super long. I tried to make it as short as possible. I even sped up my voice, but it simply is just a really good video for drawing noses. It's so compacted with information. So if you learned something, please support by commenting what you learned. Or if you're not the talking type, you can simply like this video or subscribe. It's much appreciated. Anyway, I'm done with the promotion. So I'm just adding small little details. I'm trying to be as meticulous as possible, and this is the last clip of me working on the realistic drawing. Now I'm going to switch over to where I'm teaching you guys how to draw a more stylistic drawing, more cartoon or anime noses, how to find that style or how to create that style in your own way. Anyway, bye y'all.
This is a commission piece that I did with one of my friends, and she kind of has a old anime style, and obviously there's no defined nose, but if you see here, there's still some sort of shading. First of all, you can identify whether something is the nose, and it gives the illusion that something is the nose based off of the placement. So you know that your brain is automatically going to have this idea that the nose is right in the middle of the lips and the eyes. So you can kind of play around with it. So you can add something right here to give the effect that something here is supposed to represent the nose. And then also by adding shadow. Now the lightness is here, the darkness is here, but the darkness is like a pinkish color, so it's still like kind of lively, and then here there's a little dot. And just that little dot gives the impression that the nose is there. So going back to the realistic drawing right here, you can see that what made the components of the nose when I was first sketching out look like the nose was the shadow. The shadows, the sketch, the placement of my shadows. So simply when you're drawing the nose, this is another commission work I did. I don't really draw anime that often, but what I did is I made sure the nostril's there, I made sure the shadow's there, and I made sure that it's where generally where the nose is. Too often I see people put the proportions incorrectly for a anime nose. The proportions are still right, but they just simply remove certain details from the nose in order to give the illusion that it's still a nose, if that makes sense. When I was first starting out, I would generally look for I would look at a lot of artists and I would kind of pick and choose what I liked about their art and what I didn't like about their art. Or I would pick certain things I do like and I'll implement that or try it with my style and see if it kind of connects. So for anime style, you have people who simply only draw this little dot, literally like this. It's just a dot. And then you have some that are more detailed. I believe this is Demon Slayer, where it's like the nose is protruding outward. It's still more simplistic than realism, but you know, because of the positioning of the nose, which is still not proportionally correct. You can see that the nose actually lines up with the bottom of the ears, but the space between the eyes and the nose is unrealistic. But since art is subjective, and since there's so many different styles of anime, it makes sense. Again, it's in the right place. They use, you know, not realism, but they add elements of realism like the nostrils and, you know, the shading, in order to give the illusion that it is a nose. Learn how to do realism first, because once you learn how to do realism first, you realize that there are certain components when you're drawing a specific way that you want to keep, so that you can identify that it's actually the nose. Most anime artists, I'm sure, can draw realistically as well. They can draw realism, they can draw anime, or they at least know how to do both. It's really important to be flexible. And this is not only for noses, this is for eyes, this is for just in general, everything. But you're gonna see that there's different types of noses here. And again, going based off of the reference that we used, to simplify it in anime terms, you would just add these two nostrils, and then a line to indicate, hey, this is the nose. You would just put bam, bam, bam. Or you would just put bam, bam, here's a highlight to show that there's the nose. Like, it's literally that simple. I've never really seen anybody draw noses like me. I do them kind of differently every time, but my more simplistic way of drawing noses is this, which I still have the elements of the nose, the highlights of the nose, and the dark parts of the nose, but then I just add these very harsh lines. There's no definition here, and I think this is a very cool way. It's kind of a nice middle ground for like anime mixed with realistic. It's a pretty cool style. So again, you're gonna go and you're gonna look at so many different art styles, and you're really just gonna learn that there's so many possibilities on how to draw noses. You want, again, to be flexible, and you want to be able to do everything. That's very important. Anyway, it's late. I have my PJs on. I just want to thank you guys for watching this video. I hope you learned something. If you did learn something, make sure you comment down below what you learned. If you have any tips for, you know, beginner artists that are looking to get better at drawing noses, please leave them down in the comments. There are plenty of things that I could have missed, or plenty of things that maybe I simply don't know, so let me know. If you want to know more about art, or you simply want to support a small artist, please follow me on all social media platforms. They'll be linked down below in the description. It is much appreciated, especially on Instagram. I'm really trying to grow my following on Instagram right now. I want a really strong art community there. And if you're a small artist, I will follow you back. I try to look through all the following that I have. I also have hundreds and hundreds of videos teaching you guys how to do specific things, some older. Make sure you check those out. Make sure you drink enough water. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you learned something. Bye bye.